This is the Everything Weight Loss podcast with Shari Ware, where we talk about everything, all things, anything to do with weight loss, health, and wellness. So today I have Julia Williams from The Thoughts Architect with me again today. She helps people who are stuck at a fork in the road in their career, relationships, or life itself, which leads to a lack of purpose, procrastination, and self-sabotage. Now, I know I'm not the only one who suffers from that. So if that's you, you definitely want to be listening to this episode. Julia also helps people discover how their tribal cycles and roles keep them from living the life they want to lead, particularly if they've come from dysfunctional families or childhood abuse. Dysfunctional families, I think probably most people, whether they realise it or not, they may have had some of that in their life. So first of all, I want to say thank you for joining me again for the second time today, Julia.
My absolute pleasure.
Awesome. A few weeks ago, I was Julia's first time on the podcast, and we talked about tribal cycles. Basically, Julia gave us an overview of tribal cycles and how they impact our lives, and also roles. And there were 4 main roles. So just as a little recap, I'll get Julia to go through that again, and I will also put in the show notes the link to that episode that we did previously for anybody to go back and listen to that as well. So I'll let you take the floor, Julia, and give us the overview and then what we're talking about today.
All right. So last time we were talking about in families where there's dysfunction, the children sort of learn to take on a vibe. And when there's tension in the air or when there's trouble brewing, they know how to act just as we as adults know when we walk into a room. So very quickly, children learn whether it's best to play the role of the hero and come in and save everybody, or whether you should be the scapegoat, the rebel, and take responsibility. You will be the person that everybody in the family blames, but then everything's good. Probably one of the most common ones is the quiet child or the people pleaser. And the final one is the joker. So it's possible, we discussed last time, to take on a couple of those different roles. So again, reading the room, today I think I need to pull out the joker. Today I think I need to pull out the scapegoat one. So it's possible to have more than one identity.
Yep.
But what it actually means is that over time, it's like you're a character in a movie, but you're always on the set. You never ever go home. So eventually you forget who you are.
Oh, wow. Okay.
There are many horrible aspects to that, but it also means that in every family we learn that there are certain behaviors that are okay, but we also learn there are certain emotions that are acceptable and not acceptable, and there are subjects that we do and we don't talk about. Yeah. So gradually over time we lose that. Like when we look at little 3-year-olds and they'll get out on the dance floor in front of everybody and they don't care that they've got no inhibitions, gradually the process of growing up, we are conditioned into how we behave in different settings.
Okay, that makes sense. So the 4 main ones were the hero, the scapegoat, the people pleaser, the invisible child, and the joker. That's correct.
Yep.
And so which is the most common one have you found in your experience?
So the most common one, and it seems perhaps less bad than the others, is the quiet child.
Okay.
So the quiet child is usually the artistic child, the child that loves reading books, will take themselves off into their own room, occupy themselves, and generally cause no trouble. So when the visitors come round, it might be referred to as the old soul because it's just like a little miniature adult, so well behaved, never does anything that it shouldn't do.
Yeah, okay. And so I know that you've referred to that child also as the invisible child and the people pleaser.
Yeah.
So today, because that seems to be the most common one in your experience, I'd really like to delve further into that role. So how does that play? So we know how that plays out. Well, we've got a little bit of an idea now how that plays out as a child, but how does that impact the life of an adult?
So if as a child you've learnt to just always withdraw from people, especially if there's any kind of conflict going, as an adult you will do the same. So as soon as things get a little bit testy, like often in relations, sorry, I didn't bring my English with me today. In
Okay.
intimate relationships, often when trouble brews, if you haven't had good functional backgrounds and been exposed to stress and tension and conflict and ways to navigate through conflict resourcefully without destroying each other, it may mean that as soon as there's some sort of tension building in your relationship or with a relationship with a colleague at work, you will somehow withdraw. So rather than ever standing up for yourself and saying, hey, that was not acceptable the way you spoke to me, or hey, when you speak to me like that, it really makes me feel blah, 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 you will just quietly go away.
Okay. And so if people are like that as an adult, obviously that's because as a child, well, from what you've said, it seems like as a child, that was the role that they took in the family. And so they've just carried that through life.
Yeah. So if you think when you're maybe 5 and now you're 30 or 40 or 50, you've been practicing that role more and more. So it means you've got less and less familiar. When I was studying coaching, it's amazing how many of us, we all seem to come from dysfunctional backgrounds. I think that's why you want to be a coach or a counsellor. So you very quickly realize that we're not good at expressing our emotions. If you think of your body as like a thermostat, a barometer, you can go like, I have an irresistible urge to drink a whole bottle of wine or punch a hole in the wall.
Yeah.
I don't really know why I'm feeling this way. So any of these roles we play as children, we get very disconnected from our body, because as a survival mechanism, as a child, to get through without mental illness or committing suicide, you have to learn a way to survive as best you can in that family. And survive might seem bad, but you've got to understand, with a child's understanding of the world, everything is about you.
Yes.
If your mum and dad, like say there's drug addictions and alcohol and things like that, and they're always fighting, you have to work out what is the best way to survive, because even though your family is scary, if my family, which is my home unit, which is where I'm supposed to be safe, is this dangerous, my God, can you imagine what's happening out there in the rest of the world?
Yeah.
So you learn to do it, and you learn to just shut off. I think it's like a coping mechanism. You just, physically you're there, but mentally you're not.
Yeah. Okay. So that's how you were as a child, because that's all you could do, really. Children, don't have a lot of power, really. So then how do you, and if somebody's listening to this and they recognise, because I know that when we did the first interview and we went through the roles, the overview of the roles, I know that I definitely identified with at least a couple of them. And it made me really understand, oh, okay, that's why I am the way I am. And, I've certainly done a lot of work, but there's still work to be done. So how do you
join the club?
Yeah, that's right. And that's the same with everybody. That's the thing. It helps you understand, okay, there's nothing wrong with me. This is completely normal. This is how I've come to be this way.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're listening to this and you're going, okay, well, that's me, what can somebody do about it?
So the first step is awareness that you resonate with that role, and that's what you learnt to do as a child. The second step is acceptance. There's no point beating yourself up that you do this thing. It's just, that's what I had to learn as a child to survive as best as I could in that situation. The next step is to realize in adult life, how does that show up? And it's probably going to mean that either as soon as there's conflict, I will avoid people, or possibly I might join in with the gossiping so that I fit into the group and therefore nobody picks on me and I don't ever become marginalized and become by myself. It might mean that when somebody does something that hurts me or upsets me, I perhaps won't realize the name of the emotion because I've cut off from emotions to survive as a child. But I suddenly am aware that there's some reaction in me and my internal barometer has changed. At the moment, I just want to run away. I just want to drink a bottle of wine. I just want to punch the wall. I just want to scream. I just want to get in the car and drive at 100 kilometers an hour. So there's some kind of reaction, and then you will either go into fight or flight response. So you'll either come out with your fists up and ready to argue, but people pleasers won't usually do that. I think especially as females, we're not encouraged to stand up for ourselves. So you'll say nothing, you'll suddenly remember you've got a meeting, you'll go away, and nobody will ever know you've got hurt. But the trouble with that is the more times you get used to not standing up for yourself, not speaking up for yourself, your self-esteem drops even lower. Because self-esteem is built by expressing your needs, your emotions, and your boundaries.
Okay.
There
you go.
Yes, you've been doing the self-esteem work too and not worked it out. So all of these roles mean, and another way to think of it is if you think of a family as a bubble, if it's a dysfunctional family, all of you are inside that bubble, and one person inside that bubble is angry, that affects everybody inside the bubble. Whereas, so you're enmeshed. Whatever I'm feeling is related to what you're feeling. Say, for example, if we're in the same family. Healthy boundaries are, there's me inside this bubble, there's you inside your bubble. We interact with each other, but we have boundaries. I can see that you're upset, but it doesn't necessarily change my emotional state. Maybe as a friend, I'm there to support you, but I don't have to leave this situation and go like, well, now I'm upset too because she's upset. Or I'm angry because she's angry. So boundaries is one of the things that generally in a dysfunctional family you don't learn. So in that situation when there's conflict, I'm not going to say to my girlfriend or my boss, I really don't appreciate it when you speak to me like that. It makes me feel blah, blah, blah. We probably wouldn't have the language to word it that well. It'll probably be either say nothing and then you keep pushing it down, pushing it down, pushing it down, and then you explode and you say something you shouldn't, and you point the finger at them. And again, it's understanding that you do that because nobody modeled for you how you should set boundaries for yourself. You also didn't learn. Most of us were brought up in an era where any of the emotions that we labeled as negative are not acceptable. You pretty much have to be happy, pleasant, sort of even all the time. We don't want highs and lows. We just don't want the extremes. Don't be so dramatic. Stop crying. I'll give you something to cry about. So stay there in the middle, because as soon as you go above or below, I'll wipe that smile off your face. Sit down, be quiet. So we learn that those emotions are okay. And as soon as something that happens that triggers us, we know again that we're upset. Something's wrong. I don't know how to label it, but we don't know how to react, what to do with it. So again, the people pleaser will probably withdraw. So it's this pattern of keep pulling away. And the more that you pull away and you don't express how you're feeling, obviously the more your self-esteem is going to drop.
Wow. Okay. So
in the end, you're really becoming a doormat. I cannot say anything. I can never stand up for me. And how does that, I'm upset when my mother never ever stands up for me. In 50 odd years, she never has. But I seldom stand up for me too. That's a pattern I've learned. And the other side of that is the needs in your self-esteem. So again, if you've grown up in this family where everything is about this one person who's deciding how we're all going to feel, you don't learn to express your needs. Hey, I'm really tired, I want to go to bed early, or hey, I really don't want to kiss Uncle Arthur because he's stinky, or whatever. So again, as adults, we grow up, and I think again as women, we don't know how to say what's wrong. We're so busy caring for the children, caring for our partner, caring for everybody, That's part of our role, I think, as nurturing and the chemicals and stuff. But you get so lost again in that identity of the mother, the wife, that again, you forget who you are. So I think, I don't want to say that men don't do it rough, but I think for females, it's hard. There's a lot of roles that we take on, and many of them are nurturing, and you put everybody else, like, you know yourself as a mum, like there's days when the kids are sick or you're sick, but you don't get a day off because you're sick. You have to keep going.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so awareness is the first step. Acceptance is the second. Then what was the third again? Remind me.
Oh, we haven't done that yet.
Oh, there we go. Okay, time for the third
That's
step.
for next episode. No, it's easy to remember. It's the 3 A's. So there's awareness, there's acceptance, there's action.
Okay, yep.
So again, in the situation with you, say we're good friends, you've done something that's upset me, I need to be brave and say to you, hey, it really makes me feel sad when you blah, blah, blah. Or, hey, I really don't like it when you blah, blah, blah. And hey, I really don't like it when you just come around to my house any old time, or I don't like it when you, like if we were sharing a house, I don't like it when you just go into my bedroom and borrow my clothes. That's a boundary violation.
Yeah.
But again, we come back to awareness that this is a new behavior for me. I'm not going to do it well. I'm going to get some reactions from people that I didn't expect to get. Like a girlfriend of mine, her husband was always hitting on me. And finally, I sent him a message to say, hey, you need to stop this. If you don't, I'm going to talk to your wife, and I'm keeping this text message to protect myself. But when I think about it, it sounds very confrontational, and the guy was scared. So he went and showed it to his wife. I've lost my best friend as a result. That wasn't an example. That wasn't an outcome that I had anticipated, because I knew it during the boundaries, and it's clunky and it's not always going to be right. And I have to accept that.
Yeah.
But with practice, I'm getting better and better. So,
yeah, that's one thing I always say is anything, especially, you know, if we're talking, we had a role as a child, and then because we didn't know any different, we didn't even realise that we were playing a role. We've taken that into adulthood, and then we think, okay, right, now I'm aware of it. I've accepted that this is why I am the way I am, but I want to change that. It's not working for me. And then but we've been, say we're 35 years old, so we've had 35 years of playing that role. So then we're trying to change that. We're trying to do things differently. We're trying to do things in a way that serve us better, and help with our self-esteem and all of those things, help us show up better in the world. But it's not familiar. It's very unfamiliar because we've never done it before. So anything that is unfamiliar is not going to go perfectly the first time. Definitely. It's going to take some time. It's going to take a few different attempts, probably more than a few different attempts, to get it to a point where it is familiar. But that's like with anything that's unfamiliar. The only way it becomes familiar is to keep doing it. So that's awesome. And
there's a model that they use. There's unconscious incompetence, like I don't know that I should be able to do this thing and I'm not.
Yeah.
Then there's conscious incompetence, like, okay, now I realize I'm not good at expressing my emotions. Then there's conscious competence. I've really got to make an effort to go like, oh, she said something that's upset me. Now I've got to step up and express my emotion or my need from her right now. And then finally it will become, what is it? Unconscious competence. It will just become a natural behavior. I think it's like driving a car. Like nobody gets in a car, especially a manual, and drives it beautifully the first time. Yeah. It takes a long time.
Yeah.
Being females, we're obviously quicker than the males. But.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's just a matter of, you know, and for people to realise, I think one of the biggest messages that have come for me out of this, from these talks with you, is that it's actually not my fault. It's actually not that I was lacking in any way. It's just that was my role in the family, and I continued that role. and it's interesting. I think anybody, people have things that happen in their life that, and everybody has different experiences. So I think some people will come out of this or progress further along their journey earlier and than some, and some might be later. I actually had already started. I didn't know why until we had our first chat, but I'd already started progressing, which is really awesome. And that's the thing, you don't necessarily have to be aware of this stuff, but I do know that for me anyway, it was definitely, it was so nice. It's actually like a relief to know, oh, okay, it's not that there was anything wrong with me. It's not that I was lacking in any way. It's just that's the way it was, and now it's time to let that go, which is really good. So is there anything else?
Last time we talked about it's not your family's fault. Like, they've had the dysfunctional families over the years. They've learnt roles. Like attracts like. So you're probably going to end up with someone who's come from a similar family so that you can continue playing that role and they play their role because you know how to do that. So it's familiar.
Yeah.
And when you get older and you start to realize, like, hey, I'm not really happy inside. I don't know what it is. I can't put my finger on it.
Yeah.
And I think, as you say, once it's like when you feel unwell in your body and you go to the doctor and he can't tell you what's wrong. Well, how can I try and get my body better if I don't know what it is? Like, yes, I can do exercise and I can eat healthier, but if I know exactly what it is, I can heal it much faster.
Yeah, that's true, definitely. So,
and for me, that self-esteem triangle, I've been working on self-esteem forever, and it's like, that makes sense. Needs, emotions, boundaries.
Yes.
And any role that you've played as a child, you're probably not going to have learnt them.
Okay, so we will have to talk about that in another episode as well, and we will also do further episodes on the other three main roles in the family, and I will put all of the links in the show notes to connect with Julia further, and also the previous podcast, as I said before. But if somebody's listening to this episode, Julia, and you want them to walk away with one thing, what would that one thing be that you want people to know?
I think it's just the awareness and the acceptance, and that it is going to take a while to learn new behaviours.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen overnight, but it will happen.
And there's no perfect. You don't have to be perfect at it, because there is no perfect. What is perfect? So, okay. Well, thank you so much for joining me again today.
No worries. My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And we will see everybody else on the next episode. See ya.
When it's cool.
Thank you so much for joining me on this episode. Remember to check out the show notes, and if you have any comments, feedback or suggestions, I'd love to hear them. If you've received value from this podcast, make sure to subscribe, and I'd love you to rate and review the show. Have a fabulous day.